Okay, hello everyone, welcome back to the Beta Podcast. I am joined here by Ricardo Tanis. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Super fine.
Perfect.
Super fine.
So do you want to introduce a little bit about yourself, what you're working on, and...
You told me you were going to lead the conversation. I was going to have to fill in some small gaps, but you already throw me out there. No,
I'm
fine.
sorry, yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for the invite. So my name is Ricardo, as you correctly pronounced.
Yep.
I'm the founder of Join, and we connect companies to students over dinner. So essentially trying to rethink talent attraction and rethink the way companies and talents interact.
Yeah, so it's a new way of recruiting. Predominantly, is it graduates from universities or people looking for internships?
Predominantly graduates, yeah. We've done internships, we've done full-time positions. There's some that are, companies are hiring for internships that are then converted into full-time jobs. So it's a bit of, but definitely graduates, yes.
Perfect. So before we'll go more into Join and go into depth about that, but what I like to do on the podcast is usually go into a deep dive about the person. So right. I want to hear more about you, more about your background. So do you want to explain where you're from, where you grew up, and a little bit of your experience growing up?
Absolutely. Going back, it's been interesting because we always talk about this when we interview the candidates.
Yeah.
So it's inverting the perspective. Exactly. And I'm always asking them, like, what would I answer? And we go, now I have the chance to do so. So I'm originally from Brazil. So I'm a dual citizen, but I grew up in Brazil. So I'm Brazilian Italian, but I was born and grew up in Brazil. As a background, so I was born in a smaller city, moved to São Paulo. That's the place where the majority of people would know. It's like when they ask me where you're from, in Brazil. So I have been living in São Paulo for the past 10 years. Basically, I moved to go to high school, and then I stayed for university. Picking a course was actually one of the, I think it's where the story starts like connecting to what we do right now, because I had a bit of a dilemma, if you will, because I was very interested in sort of like humanities, but on the other hand, like I knew that employability, let's say like in terms of like finding a job or like employability wise, I knew that if I chose something more related to maths and sciences, I'd be more like
attractive,
exactly, or on a more certain or a more attractive path, if you will, if regarding employability. And what happened was I discovered that in my university, I went to the University of São Paulo, so USP, and at the University of São Paulo, this is why whenever I say to people I study computer engineering, and I
think the camera just
go on. Shut up. Relax. Is it? Relax.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Let's turn this up. This is blowing me this thing. It's bad. It's got like an inquisition sort of a scenario. Should be fine. Yeah. I'm gonna pretend I'm very relaxed and calm.
Do you want to move in just a little bit? That should be fine.
Is this fine?
Yeah, that's better just so we can get you in the camera in the shot. Okay, yeah, sorry, carry on.
Don't worry. So you're gonna edit out, and I'm sure you're just gonna put my best bits on the video.
Absolutely.
So it's gonna be it's gonna be a Vine, pretty much. 15 seconds. Hi, I'm Ricardo. It's the end.
It's TikTok now.
Oh, is it? I'm completely out of the loop of whatever is happening. But so what happened was I discovered that it was one of the very few courses at my university that was offered in this, it's what you call like a cooperative mode, if you will. And what that means is essentially it's a 5-year course, like engineering in Brazil, it's more often than not a 5-year course. So if you ask me, far too long. But
so is that 5 years? Is that with a placement year, and then you have a master's as well?
Generally, it's 5 years of just theory. So you do an internship or something, and you leave university with a bachelor's, which is far too long. If you ask me once again.
Because I've got friends at Imperial that have done mechanical engineering, and it's a 4-year course, but
plus the industry placement
as well.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's generally what happens here, and it's generally what happens in Italy as well, as far as I know, like in a few other countries. I know that I have some Greek friends, and in their case, it's also I think it's a 5-year course, and you just leave with a bachelor's.
Yeah.
Anyways, however, the educational system or the higher educational system was structured, and it's like a wider discussion, but. Yeah, I mean it has its pros and cons. I can go into that, but the point was our course in particular was modeled after I think it was invented or the first course that was sort of like formatted in this way. It was in Canada at the University of Waterloo.
Okay.
And what a cooperative course, as I was saying, sort of like entails is that you have, in my case, it was a 2-year, so like 2 foundational years, and then the 3 last years you don't have terms or semesters. You have blocks of 4 months. And in an alternate fashion, you have 4 months of classes and 4 months of mandatory internships. So you don't go to university, and you're sort of like obligated to find an internship. So I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to really try out different things. So I was, in turn as like a software developer, in turn as like a wealth management firm, and then electronic trading, and then I was
So were you steered down this path of like, this is where people make money, or it's like good for my career, like, or was it just experimenting?
I thought it was. I was 18, 19, right? So I thought this is the prime time for me to make mistakes, or to see what I'll actually enjoy. And it was like one after the other. I would always use the same sort of like a thermometer, if you will. I would always look at my immediate superior, so the person directly above me, and I would always think like, if everything goes well, if I perform as they're expecting me to perform, or better than that or whatever, and if they hire me as a full-time person, the next sort of like role I'm going to be taking, if everything progresses in its natural way, it's this person's who's above me's job, right?
Yeah.
And I would always think like, do I actually want to do what he's doing or what she is doing?
Yeah.
And that would always be like sort of like the thing for me. And oftentimes, like in many cases, I'm just like, this is not really the life I want to be leading. So I had a bit of a struggle with this. Like I thought because you generally have a big divide in engineering, or at least from my experience. You have the people who want to make money and the people who want to do something that they exactly, and then the ones who want to be engineers, exactly,
build bridges and electrical engineering.
Exactly, and then I think in the last few years you started seeing something. I think today even more predominantly, because generally the way to make money a few years back was finance, right?
Yeah.
So banking and funds and whatnot. So that was the surefire way to go. And then you could argue consulting, but if you're talking about computer engineers, not many of them want to be like consultants, and like so you would generally put like risk management and like people running reports for funds and automating processes and all that stuff, electronic trading and all that. And then on the other hand, you would have the people that actually wanted to be engineers and wanted to get more proficient in writing code and like write better code and all that stuff. And then you started having the guys that wanted to go to startups, and oftentimes it's the guys who initially would take a pay cut, but not anymore, because now you have like scale-ups where you once had startups. Like the startup scene like pretty much like blossoming and whatnot. And then you had the guys who were going to startups as well. But then I think they would also fall into this first category.
But I think there's almost a transition now where like people doing engineering or computer science, STEM subjects, the demand for web developers, coders, engineers, those sort of things, their salaries are commanding way higher now.
Oh yeah, and that's overcome. I think it's like I would dare say it's a bit of a sweet spot, because it's a job that you can do with passion, but at the same time you earn as much as your friends who sold their souls, let's put it into quotes, to go work at a bank. So yeah, I think that can be done. I think it can be definitely said, but. And I think it's a pretty cool thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the flip side, which is every now and then you hear of startups that went belly up, but that's the price you pay. But like if you're just working for it, I mean, it's not that.
Yeah, it's not the be all and end all for your career anyway.
I mean, if anything, because they tend to either grow very fast or go belly up. Crash and burn. Quickly. Yeah, I mean, it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
Right. I like to think that. But so I was doing like these very different things, and then for one of my last placements, I was working for AB InBev, the brewing company. So it's a Brazilian company. It's like the biggest brewing company.
Yeah. Is it Budweiser that they got?
It's Budweiser, it's Stella, it's Corona, it's a bunch of them. But anyways, and it was to be honest, I had been involved with HR before. I had done an internship at a traditional HR company, and I thought it was actually quite interesting, but at the same time, almost even more than it was interesting, it was highly inefficient as well, because you have like a bunch of people evaluating things that they don't always know what they're evaluating. I would say almost dare say more often than not, they don't really know what they're assessing. But fine, I mean, it would have as a technical person, let's put it this way, it would oftentimes get recruiters asking you like, oh, so how proficient are you in this, and like they don't really know what that thing is. And I thought this is a bit of a,
so not enough specialized knowledge on what it was that they were hiring.
I mean, it's a bit. There's even like a simpler example. I remember oftentimes, and I was, because my mom is an English teacher. We learned English early on, which was like a.
Is she an English teacher in Brazil?
In Brazil. So we were, myself and my siblings, we were kind of blessed because we had the chance to practice from an early age, and it's like a thing that really helps you out. And what happened was I would go on interviews, and oftentimes you have a recruiter who's not really fluent in English asking you like, are you fluent in English? And they really have to take your word for it. Which is a bit of a, do you get my point? It's like, okay, great. Like, even if I told you like, yes, I am, you wouldn't be able to tell me, to disprove or to prove that I am or I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a complicated thing. And then you can extrapolate from this to, Excel skills or whatever it is you want to, programming skills. Like, how good are you with like coding in Java? If I don't code in Java, it's a bit hard for me. It's a bit of a weird task for me to say, okay, I'm going to assess you on something that I don't really know myself. Yeah. So that's the point. So that's when I found a bit of a weird thing. And what was interesting, and the reason I'm talking about, so I thought it was interesting, the whole HR thing, because at the end of the day, you have a lot of these people, and I don't mean any disrespect, it's just that I think there's a mismatch in the way things are organized. Because you oftentimes have people that are not proficient in something, judging or assessing other people on those skills.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is because these are the people that oftentimes have the power to say,
the yes
yay or nay, for
Make
someone.
Or break someone's career.
Exactly. And you're off, just out of university, and you're like, oh, it's going to be my first job. No, it's not going to be your first job because someone decided you're not good at this thing you thought you were, So that's the part that really sort of like stuck to me.
Yeah.
It's fine. You could argue it's a bit of a first world problem, but I would definitely disagree, because I mean it's really the chance of someone that you're might be taking away. And I started working for AB InBev, and the reason why I think it ties back or links back to the whole interest in HR that I had was that they are a brewing company, and I think that the reason why they were so disruptive, if you will, and revolutionary in sort of a sense, is that they had and they still have a lot of very different processes and let's say evaluation mechanisms when it comes to their people. So one of the things that I remember when I was doing the interview process, and I think it was something very similar to what Amazon does as well. So they literally, it's not that they don't care about your CV, but your CV is not everything.
Yeah.
So they actually want to get to know you as an individual, whether you have the corporate values, whether you like think the same way, regardless of whether you study like anthropology or zoology or anything in between, So that's what I find pretty interesting. Because it kind of shows you like, okay, cool. And I had a bit of an issue because I knew that I was very extroverted, and I really liked working with people.
Yeah.
And oftentimes my CV, there was a funny story, like my CV would be discarded oftentimes because it would like read computer engineer, like hell no, he's not going to be a people person. Like, right? And don't get me wrong, I have really good friends who are a bit more introverted and who went to university with me, but you do have, and I used to think it was like a unique case, like am I really misfortunate because I'm in this situation in which I'm trying to break away from my CV or like the way I should be according to my CV. But the more you talk to people, the more you realize that not only in computer engineering or like let's say technical backgrounds, you have a lot of people trying to step away or to break away from that
stereotype.
Exactly, from that stereotype that you're a given CV or a given background sort of like grants you. And you're trying to say, oh, listen, like I even though I've done something a bit more in the humanities side, I now learn how to code online, and like I want to take a shot at it as a developer. That's great. If anything, I think you bring a different perspective to old, not old, but let's say to different careers, which I think is very interesting. I haven't finalized your questioning, right? But go on.
I was going to say, before we sort of move on to join and coming to the UK more, I just want to know what it's like growing up in Brazil for you. How was it for you?
Wow.
Has it, like,
in what sense?
Has there been sort of any fundamental lessons or anything like that growing up in Brazil that have helped you in your business life?
That's an interesting one, and I have to say that right off the bat, like I'm not. I really like the word, but you could say like I was privileged because I was never someone who like was starving or anything of the sort. My family, thank God, like had the means and whatnot. We were able to attend really good schools and then really good high school and then go to a really good university. I appreciate that's not the situation for the great overwhelming majority of the people in Brazil. And I've had friends at university who didn't come from the same privileged background. I had some who had, but some who hadn't, or who didn't come from the same privileged background. And that was one of the things that I think that the core part of the answer to the question is like, and I've spoken about this time and time again, is that one of the interesting things that I've spoken to people that grew up in also in underdeveloped countries is that you learn. I think you learn not to take things for granted because there's so much disparity, and you see people that don't have the same opportunities as you've been given. You sort of learn to appreciate what you have a bit more.
Yeah.
Which I think is a fantastic thing. We tend to joke about first world problems, third world problems, sort of a thing.
Course, yeah.
And in Brazil, because you're exposed to many different realities and many different sort of backgrounds and stories altogether, you sort of say like, okay, cool. Like I don't have everything I want to have. I'm working towards whatever it is I want to achieve. But let's be thankful for what I do have, and for having a family, and for having like financial stability, all that stuff.
So the key lesson then is maybe it taught you to be very grateful.
Definitely, I think definitely, and it also because you see and witness some really interesting and inspiring sort of like stories of people that striving and like achieving what they want, whatever it is they want to achieve.
Yeah.
It's something that really makes you sort of like acknowledge the value of like hard work.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this doesn't happen here, but because people are coming from, I would say, dire or like even more complicated sort of like family backgrounds and social economical backgrounds, and you can see that they can succeed. And you want, start, it's proof, or like it's physical evidence that it doesn't really matter where you come from. Of course, it plays a role, but it doesn't really. It shouldn't.
Well, it can accelerate the process, right?
Absolutely. If daddy knows someone. And because you hear all these stories, and I think that don't want to digress, but like I was reading, because it was becoming a bestseller and whatnot, the whole Bad Blood book about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. And one of the interesting things is that her family was like friends with Tim Draper, right? Like the whole the super seasoned VC investor and whatnot. And like he was the first guy to write them $1 million check. And from that, I'm not saying that she hasn't got any. I mean, she knew how to sell her idea more than like the majority of the people. And she's a fraudster and all that stuff. She's yet to be determined, but that's another topic altogether. But the point is like that definitely helps, right? I mean, if you get like a $1 million check to sort of like just to play around, it's definitely not a bad thing. But
we're breaching on Trump territory here.
You
steer clear of politics.
No, I don't want to get to that. But I'm just saying that it's a clear example because this one was still in my mind. But I mean, definitely, if you go to your Stanfords and your MITs and whatnot, like these are universities that are whoever goes there is expected to accomplish great things, and it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in sort of a sense. And especially it's like quite a mainstream thing, so it's easier for you to get funding, it's easier for you to get a bunch of things. But so whenever you hear about these, I'm digressing completely. You're gonna have to edit this out. But the point here for me is that I think definitely being grateful, definitely showing you the value of hard work. And I would say because like people have like all sorts of stereotypes about Brazil, and I think that one of the very few things that is actually true is like we're a happy people, right? And that's one of the things I'm very, very I think grateful for, and like it makes me miss home from every time.
Because over the New Year's you went home, didn't you?
Oh I try to go once a year. I think it's like it sort of re-energizes you or anything. Like it's important for me. It's a huge thing to be with family and be with friends and whatnot.
Absolutely.
It's quite a different place. It's quite a different place. I'm not sure if it's because I'm saying it because I'm from there and I'm highly biased, but it's one of those.
But you can contrast. I mean, we're sat in the centre of London right now. Like, it must be so different from the type of people.
Absolutely. And I have really good friends from the UK and from England or the UK. I don't want to get into politics again, but the whole Brexit thing coming about. But I have friends from many places. It's quite a different thing. It's quite a different thing. There's this thing. And often when I talk about Brazil people, there's a type of Brazilian person that goes abroad and then comes back and says, everything in Brazil doesn't work, and nothing in Brazil works.
Oh, right.
And it's like it's just much better, especially in the US, because people
like a snobby kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I have no idea. Like I went to the US and it was like amazing. There's like this doesn't work here. And the fact is that I've always tried to keep like a very let's say a balanced stance, if I may put it this way, in the sense that yes, we have heaps and heaps and heaps of problems, but there are quite a few things, and I'm not saying, I'm not sure, it might be my bias here because I am Brazilian. That I just think that it's just like simpler and better there. I mean, it's like it's in the small things. It's in you talking to people and people not taking life too seriously, taking it with a pinch of I think like it's definitely less stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that you don't work or you
Yeah,
don't
of
have
course.
responsibilities. You do have them.
But maybe satisfaction is not based on like unit economics of how much like these
how much
learn,
you accomplished today, and how much
or it's happiness is measured.
It's an interesting thing,
or-
I've spoken to some. Sometimes it's a bit of an odd thing, like because you have literally in London, like I think it's one of the most international places in the world, right?
Absolutely,
you have people from literally all corners of the globe here, and it's an interesting thing because you speak to people from, we deal with restaurants, so from waiters to. Uber drivers, and you speak to like peers and people who are working in consulting, all sorts of people.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of sort of like a. It's interesting because I have international friends working in London as well in all sorts of sectors, and sort of like the common denominator here is that London is a place where you come to make money and then you go back to your home country.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're an international person, it's like sort of like you come, you make, you sort of like put your money for the rainy day sort of a thing, and then you go, back to where you want to actually enjoy life.
Yeah.
If you came from, wherever it is you came from, you just, you come here for work, and I think ever since I've been told this, and ever since I first heard it, and then I've kept on hearing like different variations of the same story, I started like paying more attention to that, and I think there's definitely some truth to that. And don't get me wrong, I really love London. I really enjoy living here. It's not home, but it's different. It's a different sort of a place. But there's definitely that element as well. Like people are here to listen. I need to make it, and I think that sort of like transpires to the rest of the environment in sort of a sense.
Awesome.
Anyways, I'm gonna start going for shorter answers because I'm talking for far too long. And you have your lunch.
Fine, right. Yeah, we've reset.
Are we good?
Perfectly. Yeah. So the next stage I want to talk about. So let's go back to So you've completed your undergrad now, and so you come over to the UK to do a master's. Is it LBS? Was it
London Business School?
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So there was one part of the answer that was still missing from the.
Okay, sorry. Let's go back.
Answer. I apologize because I digressed and now. But basically, what happened was I was working at AB InBev, so just to tie the two sort of like ends of the story. But basically, I was working for AB InBev in the exports department. I was really enjoying it. It was the first job that they actually gave me because they ignored my CV in sort of a sense. They actually gave me a chance to do something that dealt with people, and I loved it. At the same time, I had been sort of like shortlisted to become part of their trainee, the graduate scheme and stuff, and I was super excited. And then I started having all those sort of like very stereotypical sort of like millennial sort of dilemmas, like, is this what I actually want to do? Is this where my purpose lies?
Am I making an impact?
Yeah. And I did like it was a very short sort of like simple reasoning, if you will. I drink very little, especially for Brazilian standards. I drink very little, and I thought, like, is this what I actually want to do?
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna have to be doing like selling. What I'm gonna be doing is essentially I'm gonna be helping this company sell beer. Don't get me wrong, they do more than that, and I think they have a positive impact. All in all, but is this really what I want to be doing in the best part of my active hours? And I remember. Around that time, I was approached by. I had applied already to come to the master's. I didn't really know what I was gonna do, and I applied and I said, just let's see what happens. I applied to LBS because I knew it was a bit more, professional or business focused.
And had you been much to the UK before this, or?
I had done a year in Durham.
So
Yeah. So it was actually the thing that inspired me to come back to the UK because, like, the whole international environment and like dealing with like people from all over. That was one of the things that I really, really liked. So, not to mention I already knew English, so I was going to somewhere else and I have to learn the language or something of the sort. But no, I had. My mom is super passionate about the UK and London in particular, so I think it was a bit of a
a little bit of a push.
Yeah. She have an excuse to visit or whatever. But the thing was, so that was what sort of motivated me to apply to master's courses here, and but around the same time, I sent the application. I was still working for AB InBev. And I was approached by this guy who was referred to me by a friend referred him to me And he was starting the startup, which sounds a bit redundant. And it was essentially an HR tech company. And what they were trying to do, and I thought was like sort of like a perfect timing in sort of a sense, was they were trying to use technology to actually assess people in a more scalable fashion.
Yeah.
And I, having experienced or lived through the problem of, having people that, as I was saying, don't really know how to evaluate you, evaluating you.
Yeah.
I thought this is pretty cool. So I joined. I was the 5th guy. I saw us grow from like 5 people to 30 people.
Wow.
Super fun. It was like one of the most enriching experiences of my professional life.
That teach you a lot about what it's like in a growing company at that stage.
I mean, absolutely. I think it's like a prime opportunity because essentially like you see the things, essentially like brick by brick. Being built, and oftentimes you're the one sort of like carrying one or two bricks, but it's a pretty interesting thing, and like to see like the whole trial and trying and failing, and tweaking and trying to come up with like a vision of a product or a vision of a platform, a vision of a service, and selling that and understanding that it's not. And however, and I cannot really emphasize this enough, it's not a rational thing oftentimes, the decision to purchase or to hire a service or a product,
Yeah.
It's more often than not a very convoluted sort of a logic that you have on the other
Sometimes
line.
it's an art rather than a science.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that you can definitely try and create procedures to try and fail, and that's the science part. But the art of actually trying is, I think, is like an art.
Yeah.
So I think you can combine the two things definitely. But so I was there, and that's when I got the offer. And then it was another sort of like big dilemma because I was enjoying the company. I had been offered equity, and knew it was growing. As I was a bit of a, however ironic it may sound, like I had some stability within the startup. But, and I had the choice of actually staying or coming to do the masters. And I thought, back then I was 24. And I think this is still the time to sort of like make mistakes. And I had this idea in mind that I wanted to try out, which was join essentially. And I just decided to come. So I did, I did do the masters, but throughout the masters, I was actually not really interested in landing a job, which was a bit of an exceptional situation because the majority of the people are here to already have a few like roles.
Something lined up already, or it's like they know the path that they're going down. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was a bit of an odd one out in that sense because I was literally trying to make this work. So we were trying to work. The whole idea.
So when did I want to get to the movie moment of when you're sitting there and you had this idea for Join particularly? When did you start working on it? Like, is there a story behind it?
The thing is, there is. I wish there was. I think that. I watch a lot of movies, and I think it's a problematic thing because like Hollywood puts all of these snippets in your mind. Right? You've been looking at the window, you're gonna have like this striking idea. But
see a group of students going to a dinner.
Yeah. I remember that beautiful mind scene where he starts like writing on the writing on the window. I'm not any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a genius. I'm not going to be writing on windows, or if I do, it's just vandalism. It's not any sheer
not any genius.
Right. So the thing for me is that do you want to know about when we got the first idea? Is that it?
Yeah. Also, so like when the storyline of Join, like how did it get to it? You don't have to go super into detail, but just
You've learned from your mistakes. Like ask me a broad question, I'm going to be talking for 10 minutes. No, I think that the key thing here was that it didn't really start with a focus on HR. It was more than anything, it was like a social experiment. So for those that know me, like I have a huge issue with social media or the way we consume it. I'm not a big fan of, I find it very weird. I'm very extroverted. I have no problems like striking up conversations with strangers, if you will. But I find it very weird for me to posting pictures and like what I'm checking in on. Oh, Ricardo was at the Burger and Lobster. Or was like Nando's. It's a weird thing, it's like who cares?
You just want to live it,
Exactly. So, and I think that it's a wider discussion of like enjoying it versus promoting whatever it is you're doing to other people. But we're not going to get into that because that's a wider discussion. But the point for me was that I'm someone who really thinks that we are sort of like missing out on a lot of what makes us sort of like humans, like the whole connection element of like having a conversation in which you're not checking your phone or which you're not, thinking I should be elsewhere. I think life is essentially choices, and if you make a choice to be wherever it is you are, just enjoy that, right?
Yeah.
So the initial idea was to come up with a platform that was sort of like kind of like meetups. in which you would essentially meet people who were in the same vibe, if you will, of like doing whatever it is you wanted to do. Like you want to go bike riding, you want to go sushi eating, you want to go rock climbing, whatever, it didn't matter. And then we realized that it was quite complicated to try and do that.
And then also in terms of scaling it as a business, is it difficult when it's like consumer to consumer?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the idea was to have some sort of like if you will, a targeted or a niche meetups. The idea was to use. I remember thinking, I think the idea is really cool. Like meetups is a pretty interesting thing, but at the end of the day, say for the lack of a better example, I'm not sure if you've ever been to like meetups events, or like a meetup itself. Even if you're like a huge fan of whatever topic is being discussed, at some point you're just like, okay, great, like can we talk about something else? And it's the feeling I always had, it's like, God, But so it's essentially boils down, and I think that we are becoming more insular, so like people meeting with people and bonding and like finding commonality and whatnot and talking about whatever. You need an initial common ground. So let's say we both like startups and we start talking about startups, and then we discover
branch off and
exactly. So, and we said, why don't we actually focus on the university? Because there's a whole idea like Facebook started in just one university and then expanded from universities. We said we have a very targeted niche university in our hands, which was LBS, and since I was a student, so I said, why don't we start just focusing on this specific community? I had a guy who was working with me back then. It was like a founder. We started this together, and he was coding. We started like, are we going to make an app? Are we going to make like a website? We said just the website is simpler to prove the point. And we said we're not going to be able to offer every single activity, but let's start with something that actually helps people bond, which is food, right? Not to mention that operationally it's simple because
book a restaurant.
That's it. Like you go there, like this is the address, show up.
Exactly.
Don't make a fool out of yourself. Just eat, in a civilized manner and bond. So that's how it started. And this was November 2016. It was literally an email that I circulated around. I think it was 100 people, and then 60 people said, I want to be a part of this, and we were like, okay, cool. Awesome. So we divided them in 10 groups of 6. I think it was the 21st of November 2016, so it's quite a while now. And then what I did was like in the best, if you will, startup fashion or like trial and error sort of a thing, or a user interview, whatever fancy startup lingo you want to use to describe it. I basically interviewed everyone who attended the dinners to understand what they thought of it, and they were like, oh, this is super cool. They met this guy from my class I'd never seen before. He was like literally like sitting 2 rows behind me. We had never had a conversation. I was like, oh, when can we do this again? This was an overwhelming response.
Like positive responses,
And so that was basically it. We started with the master's students, and we went to MBA students, the executive MBA students, and soon after we were like mixing up the whole university. Then I had some friends at Imperial, some friends at UCL, some friends at LSE, some friends at King's. Started doing the same at a smaller scale, of course, because those universities are way bigger. But we did do many dinners between the universities as well. And the problem was, if I may put it this way, is that some people are really, really keen on it. Some people, want to come every week, if possible. We had a few cases of people that came like 3 dinners in like a month and a half, and I was like,
calm down.
I mean, this is a heavy user, if you will, but and it's a pretty interesting thing. But the problem is, like, you're still in London, and it's quite expensive to eat out, right? And not to mention that once people go once, they're like, okay, cool, like I met some people, or like I have my own friends and whatnot.
So the lifetime value of someone
is definitely, and I think it's like, I used to think this a lot. I think I've spoken about this a few times. I think it's kind of like Tinder in the beginning.
Okay,
you're gonna go out for food with like some group, because you never knew the people you're gonna go out with, right? I mean, it's always blind. As in, we match you based on common interests and whatnot, but you don't know the group before you actually get to the restaurant. Exactly. Whole point was that for you to go with no preconceived notions and whatnot. And I think much like online dating, especially because it's something like a new concept in sort of a sense, it's the oldest thing of all. Like, you're dining out with people, it's food. It's very primitive in that sense, but it's a bit of a different twist to it. It's like you learn. You discover the restaurant one day before, and you discover the people then and there, right? So it's a bit like taking you out of your comfort zone in some sense. But I think that for every single one of these ideas, there's a bit of an adaptation. And for you to say, oh, I'm going to go to this thing, like it's like I'm going to be meeting some people over there, like, what the hell, like, why would you do that? the reason I'm talking about Tinder is like much like in the beginning, it was a bit frowned upon. It's like, oh, we're going to be meeting people.
Yeah, it's just
swiping.
weird.
It's just like weird, you know, just go out and like find someone, right? So I think it's like along those lines. I think it's like something that would need more time to sort of like be perfected, if you will.
Yeah.
Around that time, we started, two things happened. So one was we got contacted to Amazon in a very random way. Essentially, a girl that had attended a few. She said, listen, I really love the concept. I really like the format. My husband started working for Amazon, and he doesn't know anyone in the office. So we were wondering if you could put together a few dinners for them. And we were like, you know, just say when, right? I was like, now?
Yeah.
So we did a few. The employees, so it was basically the same
just
format.
employees with employees.
Employees with employees,
okay,
exactly.
Yep.
Did it for a few other companies, and we thought this is the way to go, or at least we were thinking this is the way to go, definitely the way to go. And on the other hand, we started organizing dinners between what we called like the expert dinners. Essentially, it would be, generally the dinners are for 6, and instead of having 6 students, you would have one, the expert, if you will, an alumnus or an alumna, who would come to talk about their experience in whatever field. As a consultant, as a banker, as a startup founder, as a whatever really. And students who would come and listen to his or her story. And although we were thinking, you know, the employee dinners are the way to go, we can sell this to the companies, show that there's an ROI, you create like team
rapport,
better communications throughout the organization. We had a really funny story. There's only someone from our team to sort of just break the ice. We just wait for the people at the restaurant, and then we leave. We don't really believe in interfering and saying, oh Bailey, why don't you tell us about the mediator or facilitator or whatever. And we were at the restaurant, and we're like, some of the people had arrived, and 2 of the girls from the company started talking. Long story short, they realized they had been exchanging emails for like 4 months. They had never seen each other.
No way.
Yeah, so these sorts of things. But then, so we thought this is definitely the way to go. Building this as a tool for companies to create,
good company culture.
Good company culture, exactly. A more inclusive, more welcoming one. And on the other hand, we had this thing on the side with the expert dinners, and we said this is probably just a side thing that eventually we're going to do away with. So we spent a good 5 or 6 months trying to sell product, if you will, to companies. Very, very, very complicated. Really couldn't understand it. It was like, I don't really see the ROI. And we were like, cool. It's like you can make a small investment, see whether people like it in the long run. And they were like, no. We had conversations with 3 companies that were sort of like pretty. They had events very well. And then when the third one didn't lead to anything, I said, okay, clearly there's something wrong. In the meantime, the team was churning, and people were like, I really don't see the point. I really don't see the point in continuing. I'm fine, fair enough. So we stayed with the smaller team. And at the same time, something interesting happened, which was on stream B, if you will, which was the expert dinners. We started learning from students who were either fast-tracked or landed offers because they were referred or advised by the expert that they met over dinner.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay. And then the very, I say idiotic perhaps, because my background was actually in HR, right? I was working with HR tech before starting this thing. And then I thought to myself, like, why don't I actually focus on something that I know how to sell much better, right? And much more background, if I may put it this way, in this. So we called up a few of the companies to whom we had pitched the whole silo busting, team building sort of platform. And we said, listen, we spoke to you some time back about doing this to create like a whole corporate culture and whatnot, like team engagement, and you were not really interested, but we do have quite a number of students on our platform. So would you like to meet talent through us? And they were like, yeah, we can do that. And they were like, okay. And I was like, and I remember the first time this happened. This was like a bit of a, because we were talking. I had a I didn't know, but soon to become a client on the phone. And he was like, yeah, fine. And how much does that cost? And I was like, And my former boss, who's one of the guys that has influenced or taught me the most, he used to say there's like 3 very simple steps to starting any sort of a business. Come up with a product or a service. Like, do people use it? Do people pay for it? Do people come back? Right? It's simple as that.
Yeah.
Right? Essentially, like, you can have a sustainable business, or you cannot.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're going to go into like whole the lifetime value and the cost of acquisition and whatnot. But like it essentially boils down to
at the basic level.
Yeah. And in the simplest form is it's a product or a service. Do people actually buy it?
Yeah.
Do they pay you for it? Yes. Do they come back? Amazing.
I hope so. Yeah.
Do
With these companies and that's
essentially people use it, people buy it, people come back. That's it. And a lot of people try and show like, oh, but it's my idea and I cannot really disclose the idea. Dude, put it together. Put something up. Because I talk to a lot of people who want to sometimes and I'm in no position to sort of like lecture people on anything. By any stretch of the imagination, we haven't. We're not IPOing or anything of the sort. I mean, yes, I've had some time to try and make mistakes and whatnot, and hopefully learn something from them. But my point here is there's a lot of people that come up with like all these sorts of, oh, I'm gonna do this first and I'm gonna do that. I'm like, dude, try it out. Are people using it? Great. Can you get money out of it? No. Okay, cool. Go back to step one.
Change something.
Right, and tweak it. Yeah. I remember this was one of the really cool things that happened at the other startup. We were trying to sell this. It was like another version of the product, and we pitched it to a company. And this is like one of those things that I think it's priceless because you cannot really. It's a very weird thing. Essentially what happened was we were trying to sell sort of another version of the service. We had the client on the phone, and one of the founders, it was the two founders and me in the room, and we're like sort of like put it on the speakerphone and we're listening. And basically he says, okay, this is gonna cost you X per month. And we overhear the woman who was on the other side, not the one we're talking to, but her boss, who was also on the speakerphone, like, that's freaking cheap. And we were looking at each other like, okay, so we were thinking like they would not be able to pay this. Long story short, on the same day we had another call, we pitched the same product, the same specs, everything else. Only instead of charging X, we charged, I think it was like 2.5 times X.
Yeah.
And they closed the deal. So it's a very weird thing, and I could tell you, of it, exactly, because essentially what happened was in that specific sense, and this happens in a lot of it's anchoring, right? Whatever price you put, you're gonna liken it to something that costs around that much.
Yeah.
So if I have a new sort of a car that you can't really compare to other cars, if I say it costs almost as much as a Tesla, you've never seen the car.
Yeah.
Right? You've never seen. I can show you like it's behind the curtain or whatever. To tell you like however much a Tesla costs, you're gonna think, oh, it has the features and the benefits and all the cool things that a Tesla has. On the other hand, if I say, oh, it's gonna cost you like roughly the same as like a Popular or like a just a very unspecial car cost. Whatever that sort of a thing.
Standard service. Yeah.
So the price acts as that, if you will, that guide that sort of tells you, oh, this is how it goes, or that's how it goes. There's something interesting here. Like you're gonna have to sieve through it.
No. It's, honestly, keep going. Like sorry, carry on. About the cars.
But no, it's a whole thing about, and this is one of the things. And we were talking about it before, and you said like I might be going to do business development and whatnot for a startup. And I think this is one of the coolest things that you learn, especially if you're still in that phase in which you're doing, and I don't like using the jargon, but like the product market fit, which is essentially the iterations between, does this work? Let's try it again. Does this work? Let's tweak it again and try it again. And that's when you actually learn, because that's when you start really understanding
how people react to things and how these small changes, all these things like led to your product that you've got today.
I think more than that. I think it's like, what do they actually care about?
Yeah.
Right, because you always start like, oh, this is such a pain. I cannot stand to call a cab. Like, cool, perhaps the problem is not calling the cab, perhaps the problem is waiting for it. I mean, there's like
dissecting things.
Yeah, it's like it's a silly example, but it's sort of like, I have a really cool example, which is a very weird story, which we also heard from like a guy who was mentoring the other startup. It's a bit of but I think it's worth sharing.
Okay.
So basically, it's just in that same sort of like spirit. This is a guy who was working for a company. I think it's an international. It's called Sodexo. It's like they do meal allowance cards essentially.
Okay.
So in Brazil, it's a very common thing. Like you get hired, and you get your salary, and you also get like a meal allowance. It's like a credit card.
You can spend it on lunch or
exactly, but you can only spend it in restaurants and like supermarkets, right? So essentially, his job was to try and sell this to HR, because it's an employee perk, right? It's a benefit. So you would call HR and say, listen, we have this, and like your competitors like Visa, MasterCard, and whatnot, because they also produce these other sorts of cards. And they were a smaller company, and essentially what they did was, and this is like very weird, and I remember when he told this story, we were like, and he told it again, and we were like, sort of, rephrase it. And I was like, is that so? It's an example to show like what do people actually care about. So essentially, what he discovered was, so he was selling to HR, right? Because this is an employee perk, so you talk to the people in compensation and benefits within HR. Those were his stakeholders, or the guys who would say, we're going to buy this or we're not going to buy this. And essentially, he was losing a lot of deals to the bigger companies, Visa, MasterCard, and whatnot. And what they discovered, or through talking, because I think that's the only way to do it, really talking to your target customer, was that it's a very exceptional situation. But apparently in Brazil, land of bureaucracy, what you do have is like when you have an employee, when an employee passes away. There's a bunch of, I'm not sure if it's just the employee or if the employee has like a family member or a direct family member that passes away. There's a ton of documents that fall on the lap of the employer that they have to process and whatnot. Not the obituary, but like a bunch of certificates that you have to sort of like say like, listen, this is not related to us. It's not because of like working conditions and whatnot. Anyways, so they realized that this was like, it was a situation that happened like perhaps once a year, right? Even a person like dying of natural causes, you sort of like have to say, we need to. And they discovered that even though they did it very rarely, it was something that when it needed to be done, it was extremely complicated because you had to dig up a bunch of stuff. And they said, you know what? We offer you all the benefits that all the competitors are offering. Plus, we help you. We give you assistance whenever you need to do like the obituary or the death certificates and whatnot. They started getting started getting businesses or clients out of this. Now they're selling meal allowance tickets. It's absolutely, if anything, has nothing to do with someone passing away, right? You want to hope the food has no influence in that. But it's for me, it was a prime example, and I've seen variations of that in which you're trying to sell something. You're trying to sell like shoe shine, but people don't actually want their shoes to be shined. They actually want to wear sneakers because they don't want to have to polish their shoes, right? Or something along those lines. You're trying to sell something
that fundamentally people don't want.
And in your head, and as a founder, as a co-founder, whatever, you have it's a brilliant idea because I felt the pain, so I know that people, perhaps, bro, people don't feel the problem the same way you feel it, So, and I think the best way to do it is really to talk, first of all, keep your mind open, but keep an open mind and really try and go out there, try and talk to people, try and understand from them.
So I want to ask now as well. So let's move forward to kind of today with Join. So I was looking on your website. So it says on your website you've organised 300 plus dinners at the moment. That's
not really properly updated. I think we're about to hit like 500 like in the next few months.
Awesome. So
I think 400.
What's your sort of growth rate with these dinners? And I want to know the kind of longer term aims. Are you wanting to scale this up so it's going to be at every university in the UK?
That's a good question.
Exactly.
That's a good question. To be honest with you, this is like we've always said that we are still in between like the product market fit in sort of a sense and like thinking, starting like very, very, very much in the back of our minds, starting to try and thinking of scaling and whatnot. In London, we have recurring ones, and one of the things that I know that I mentioned that I was in Durham in the past is an Erasmus student or an exchange student, and one of the things that I remember, and in your case you're going to Warwick, and I think it's going to perhaps resonate with you, but one of the things I remember is that I used to see, my peers there, my friends who were going to university there as full-time students, really talented people that oftentimes wouldn't get exposure or a foot in the door with many employers because they were in the north of England, right? Almost closer to Edinburgh than they were to London. And I remember thinking it was a bit of a pity. So one of the things that we started doing now is we started pitching to some of our client companies. Listen, would you guys like to meet talent that isn't in London and like give a chance to people? Because if you've seen the website, you've probably seen that we talk a lot about discovery. So showing to talents companies they might not have considered, and showing to companies talents that they might not have considered, didn't even know existed oftentimes, right? So people that don't really fit that CV, but they can still do the job, or that mold, if you will, that they form in their heads. But the thing for me is that I really think that there's to about like in terms of future plans, there's one way. So we're starting to organize the first few dinners up north, which is something I'm really, really proud of, because we're breaking, if you will, the London bubble. Yeah. So for me, it's a really, really cool thing. And depending on how those go, it might be that we actually focus on, as opposed to trying to, increase the number of dinners that we're doing in London, perhaps we want to increase the number of cities, and perhaps it's actually a more and going back to my previous point, which is really understanding what your client wants. It might be that a lot of companies actually would actually have a bigger pain or a bigger problem in trying to address or trying to connect with students that aren't in London, as opposed to connecting in a better or different way to students that are already in London. Do you get my point? So it might be that, and this is actually one of the things we're really excited about, because it might be that if, depending on how these go, we say, listen, let's not focus just in London, let's start focusing on other places.
Elsewhere,
exactly. The whole point about starting this in the UK, starting this in London, was really about the whole international element of it. And at the end of the day, the big dream is actually to have this like all over, the UK and the world, in sort of a sense.
I think it just makes sense. Like, the amount of opportunity that I have had just from meeting people, if they would have just seen my CV or my name on paper, I wouldn't have done a lot of the things that I have done. So the fact is, like, I remember when you came to work and you did a talk, you talked about, was it a student that was at one of these dinners, and he had applied for a job and he found out the company it was, and they was like, oh, I'm already rejected. And then So then but then the guy came back and said, oh, this is wrong. Like, you're amazing, or whatever it is. Like, I'm really impressed. I want to put you back in the process.
Yeah, and that's one of the cases, like of a guy really finding out, like, he had applied for the company, because we don't tell you who the company is, we don't divulge that information. Yeah, he went to the dinner like blindly, as he was expected to. The company didn't know his CV, as was expected as well. That's the deal. Like, the companies don't know the students don't know the companies. Of course, they're all matched based on skills and traits that they want to see. Yeah. Corporate culture, if you will, or the company culture. But the point was, he had applied, he had been rejected. And incidentally, I remember he mentioned on his feedback email, he said, listen, I checked my email just before going into the restaurant, so I was even like a bit beat up, and I go there and I sit down and the guy says, I'm from such and such, and he's like, okay, great. I just heard from you guys. I just got a rejection from you guys, and I don't think he mentioned. I think he had the which I really thought was brilliant, because there have been cases of students that say, yeah, I've been rejected. Right? It's like, oh god. And it's like, I think it's a big thing in life. It's like all about priming, right? So if you get yourself like to think, or get the other person to think, like it's going to be a positive thing. Yeah. Because you bring the house down. It's like, yeah, I applied. Didn't get it. So naturally, it's the whole thing of like priming, anchoring. I think there's two words to mean the same thing. Then and there, the person who's representing the company is already going to think, yeah, whatever this Bailey guy does, he was already rejected, so I shouldn't bother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So in the back of your mind, it's not they're doing that because
it's just a bias. It's not. Yeah, it's just natural, isn't it?
But you're just thinking like, cool. Someone in the company already took the time to evaluate this guy for whatever reason. They said it's a no-go. Yeah. So why am I gonna waste my time? There's another five candidates here. I should dedicate my time to them. Let this guy just like do his talking, whatever. I'm gonna silently ignore him. I'm not saying this happens, but probably it's not too far from the truth, right? Because if you already say like, hey, listen, I was rejected, I was like, oh, great. And you're gonna have to go against your colleagues who rejected the person. It's a whole thing. But he just said, yeah, cool, let's just make the most of it, which I thought was I really respected. Especially because he just got the email, so he's like, "Oh, just play it cool." And long story short, the guy said, "No, the guy is really good." And I said, "Oh, incidentally, other people from the company said that he was like, he's like, no, let's go around that."
So before I move on, because we're going to finish up soon.
Absolutely.
I just want to ask you, what sort of personal goals do you have, whether it be with Join or just in the long term? Do you have any things that you particularly want to accomplish, or?
Oh wow.
I know,
deep thoughts. It didn't tell me beforehand the questions were going to be sort of like metaphysical. It was going to be more objective stuff, and I already digress a lot. But no, I think that the big objective here is really to set this up as like a sustainable business. Okay. I think we're on track to that.
And how many employees are you at the moment? Is it?
We're a team of 5.
Team of 5.
We're a team of 5. Yeah. So I don't think it's a matter of number of the employees or number of or even like the. on a personal level, I have I have some reservations around the whole sort of like Silicon Valley mentality, in which you like you do one this first month, you do 1,000 the second month, and you do 1,000,000 the third month, and oftentimes like you raise tons and tons of capital, and you're trying to either you crash and burn or you become a unicorn and whatnot. But I think it's not as simple.
But there's a place in the ecosystem for those.
Absolutely. I think don't get me wrong. I think if not wanting to sound cliche or anything, like ideally, if we were to become like a huge, humongous company, amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, most importantly, I think that for the people that we're actually serving right now, we actually want to deliver a really good service for the companies, for the students, for the restaurants that we're partners, that are our partners and whatnot. Because it's that sort of a business in which I think you touch, because we partner up with universities through the career centers, partner up with the companies, we partner up with restaurants. So it's a big sort of a thing in which you have like many different sort of like stakeholders. You have recurring business for the restaurants. You have students discovering employers. You have companies regularly building a qualified talent pipeline.
Yeah.
And I think, and rather, our goal here is to really strive to come up with something that's positive for everyone.
Yeah. So just doing what you're doing now, but making it accessible.
Yeah, making it more accessible. I remember when we started, we were charging the students more than what we wanted. Through onboarding more companies, we were able to reduce that price. We want to make it something symbolic. Like the whole point is that it's not that we want to make it. Some people like take it to mean that because we charge students, that's something elitist. Quite on the contrary, if the students can't pay, we've had cases of students that said, "Listen, like this is like a bit too much for me." When they were invited for the dinner, and they said, "Like, listen, I would love to, but I can't." We've always sort of like exempted them. Yeah.
The thing is, I think the idea of, and I won't go for too long, but the idea of like even charging as well, it creates some kind of accountability, right? Because it's like I'm investing X amount to go to this dinner. I'm going to make it worth my time.
Absolutely. The point for us, and going back, and I think in sort of like in an interesting way, tying back to your first question about the whole learnings that I had from growing up in Brazil and whatnot, and I talked to you about like not taking things for granted. I think the moment you say, listen, this is something you're paying for to the student, right? So this is something you're paying for because it's a service to you, as opposed to you're doing as a favor by showing up. Like not really. We're giving you the chance to actually be face to face with someone who can offer you a job. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, there's not much I can do. We've selected you, but through the whole process, you came up, your name was there. So I think this is a chance. Your time to shine, if you will, but you're gonna pay us because essentially that is to show that we're providing the companies with a service as much as we're providing you with a service.
Absolutely, perfect. So let's move on quickly. You probably heard these ones before, so just before we end up, it's
the cliche question,
a quick fire question.
Oh God.
So I don't know if you've had a chance to think of them, but the biggest person who's influenced you.
I think there's two in sort of a sense, in the sense that there's the media one and there's the personal one. I think the obvious person, there's two obvious ones. One being my father, because my father always had this business, even though it's like a completely different sort of a thing. And I remember it was an interesting thing because I told you about like getting internships through university. My father was always annoying me, like, "Oh, you're gonna have to get another one. You're gonna have to get another one." And I said, "Dad." At some point, I remember I said, and I've always had a really close relationship with my parents, and they've been super supportive, emotionally, financially, and whatnot, to of everything. And I remember I told them, like, "Listen, you keep on pestering me about getting an internship or getting a job because you didn't have to get one, right?" Because he had it's like a family business, and then he continued and whatnot. And then I remember saying or realizing that I had to, putting my foot in my mouth in the best of senses, because it's way more complicated when you're actually dealing with your own stuff.
Of course,
and when you're being your own boss and whatnot. And I've always told them, like, ever since I started, 3 years back, I've always respected my father, but I had a newfound respect for him, because it was like it's quite hard. And then keeping your head up, despite the whole thing. The other the media, if you will, person that I haven't really been not that I don't admire, like Bezos. I've seen on your computer, like Bezos, Zuckerberg, Musk. I mean, these are fantastic accomplishments and whatnot. But the guy that I've always looked up to is Richard Branson. So Richard Branson is like, I find it amazing. We had the opportunity. I went with a few friends to watch him speak. I think it was 2 years back, And what I find amazing is that he's accomplished so much, and he's such a down-to-earth guy.
Yeah.
And he is someone I don't know, because I don't read that much about all their lives and whatnot. I think it's a bit of a bad thing that we have in our society of like deifying all sorts of, exactly. It's like, oh my god, like Musk gets up at like 4 a.m. in the morning. I now have to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and drink whatever he drinks or eat whatever he eats, and like people think that by doing that they're gonna anyways, I think it's a bit of a screwed up thing about our society, our media, our image driven society, right?
I know what you're saying,
but what I find interesting about Branson, Sir Richard Branson, is that he's a guy who I think is able, not only he has accomplished so much, but I think, at least the impression I have is that he's managed to have a very balanced life. You see him like spending time with his family, you see him spend, and just being like a very calm sort of a person,
Perfect. So let's go on to the next one.
Yeah. It's supposed to be quick fire and I'm digressing still. Go on.
Favorite music artist at the moment?
At the moment, I'm listening to a lot of Mac DeMarco.
Oh yeah. If you could speak to 3 people, dead or alive, don't have to give your reasons. You can just you can just be like, I want this person.
You should have told me this beforehand. Richard Branson is someone that I would definitely love to speak to. Probably John Lennon.
Yep.
Third person, I never met my grandfather.
Oh wow, that would be cool.
I never met him, and it's someone that I've always been told I sort of I took a lot from.
Yeah.
Never met him, so I would love to.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Short or long Bitcoin?
Never been someone excited about the whole cryptocurrency thing.
Neither am I particularly.
I think essentially at the end of the day, this thing is gonna value itself a bit more, and then it's gonna be one of those things that's gonna as we say in Portuguese, like sort of like go side by just move sideways.
Yeah.
I would probably go long. Eventually, there's still some more money to be milked out of this, I think.
Netflix or reading?
Ideally, reading. Practically. I don't have Netflix, but I waste tons of time on YouTube.
That's me. I spend like...
Yeah, because you feel like, I remember I had like the free month on Netflix and I wasted my whole month. And then I said, I'm not mature enough to have this. I'm not responsible enough. But anyways, go on.
Audiobook or real book?
Real book, definitely.
Okay. Winter or summer?
As a Brazilian, that's a tricky one. Winter in Brazil, summer here. I think it's like in both cases, it's not too hot, it's not too cold. That's what I actually like.
Get the good balance.
Yeah.
And lastly, if you could recommend one book.
For the startup people, definitely the very obvious one is the Lean Startup, and I think that a lot of people that are thinking of starting whatever it is they're thinking of. So I have a good friend who's like very trying to come up with like a lot of ideas, and I said, listen, read the book. I remember when I talked to Warwick, you were reading it. I think you finished it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very simple book. I don't really like having all these sorts of rules, but it's as you've probably realize as well, it's a deceptively simple book, which does not mean that the concepts are simple.
Yeah.
The concepts are simple, which not
like in practice.
Exactly, which does not mean they're easy to put in practice.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think it's very interesting because it debunks a lot of these myths of like, I have to have an investment, I have to have it. No. Put a landing page up, try to get people to buy your product, try to get people to give you feedback and see what happens, and then take it from there.
Perfect. So the Lean Startup, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I will leave a link to it's comejoin.io, isn't it? So if anyone that's watching that's looking to come to one of your dinners, I'll leave a link and check it out.
Chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite. Thank you for having me.